All right, so welcome back to another episode of the Men of Culture podcast. We are here again talking about Percy Jackson. This time, episode 4, I plunge to my death. So this is where, to kind of give a recap of what happened in the last one, the trio ended up visiting the Garden Gnome Emporium, where Medusa, that was kind of like her lair, where she is, captured and killed many people by turning them into stone. Had the very underwhelming fight, I guess you could say. We'll use quotations there because there wasn't really a fight. They kind of just ran away, then threw the invisibility hat on her and then cut off her head. So very underwhelming kind of fight right there. Fortunately, this next episode, the action is a lot more entertaining, I feel. But it was very underwhelming in the third episode, but then, they get past that. The fourth episode starts. We actually have kind of like a flashback start where it's like the scene with like Percy as like a little kid, looks about like maybe like 4 or 5 years old, and he's with his mom in the pool, and she is trying to like get him to swim in the water because he doesn't know how to swim. They paid for this class that is going to teach him how to swim. And Percy is really afraid of letting go of the wall. We kind of have this little scene where she's really trying to encourage him to let go of the wall and try to learn how to swim. And at some point, like, Percy's mom starts to get a little flustered a bit because she's like really like, Percy, it's really important that you learn how to do this. And if you don't learn how to do this, it could be dangerous for you. So I need to know that you can do it. And then that kind of triggers like the scene where he's telling her just to breathe. Like he's like, you always tell me to breathe whenever I get upset or whenever I start to get a little flustered. So he tells her that, and that's kind of the end of the scene there. And then it transfers into like another dream scene where Percy is hearing the dark voice. He can't tell specifically who he is. He's kind of assuming that it's Hades at this point, but he doesn't really know. And this is kind of where we find out that the idea that, a forbidden child, in this case specifically Percy, has been claimed is really starting to spread out there, because Medusa mentioned it a little bit, but also now that this person in Percy's dreams is now telling him, this is kind of letting us know that, like, all right, everyone knows now. And this is kind of raising the stakes of the quest, because now if everyone knows, that means that everyone is going to be after them. I mean, there are already monsters generally out in the outside world, away from camp. So, like, if you're a half-blood, generally speaking, you're pretty much always in danger. But especially if you're a forbidden child. So that kind of raises the stakes of the quest right then and there, right? And then so Percy wakes up. It kind of when it wakes up, we see that they're on a train. They're kind of like in like one of those little train kind of cabin kind of things where like they got the little beds and whatnot. So at the start of this part of the book, it's kind of similar, but there's one crucial difference, because like if we remember, we mentioned it in the last episode that in the book they actually ended up losing all of their money and supplies in the bus because the bus was destroyed. They quickly just tried to run out of the bus because the Furies attacked them, like, Miss Dodds and her sisters. So they quickly got out of the bus. They then realized, oh, we left all our stuff on that bus. And then the bus blows up. And then they have no money. They have nothing. So in order for them to actually get money for this train ticket, they actually have to turn in a missing pet to a family that is offering a cash reward. So Grover is able to talk to animals. He talks to this poodle. This poodle somehow is able to read English and realizes that there's a reward for it, and it likes Grover so much that it agrees to go and allow them to turn him into his family. so that they can have that reward money so that they can buy the tickets to start heading back west, right? That didn't happen in the show. They never lost any of their money, so we just start off episode 4 right after the dream scene. They're on the train already. So that's one little difference. Nothing crucial yet, but the differences do stack up as we continue to go through this episode, right? So after this whole train scene, they have like kind of their little discussion. They give us a little bit of backstory on kind of Thalia and how she was a forbidden child, so she kind of went through some of the same things that Percy is going through right now, and how close her and Annabeth were, and how Annabeth was on her own at first because her dad and her stepmom, mostly her stepmom, did not really appreciate the fact that monsters kept coming around. So Annabeth, feeling that she was not wanted, ended up running away. She was only 7 years old. She's on her own for a little bit until Thalia and Luke find her, and then they all kind of go to Camp Half-Blood together. Well, we know that Thalia doesn't make it, but they start their travels to get over to Camp Half-Blood, right? So that's pretty similar to how it was happening in the book. There's also a scene in the book where Annabeth is kind of explaining the story pretty much in the same way to Percy. But then we see that the scene kind of switches over. We see that there's kind of can't really see specifically what it is, but we see something breaks through a window in the train. Then we see that we kind of fast forward over to they're sitting on the train. They're kind of having a discussion about, how are we going to know where to find the entrance to the underworld when we get to Los Angeles? And they're like, well, we don't really know. So they're kind of just heading west, not really knowing specifically what they're supposed to be looking for, just kind of getting over to their destination. At this point, they still have multiple days left. I can't remember specifically how many days they had left at this point, but I know that they do have kind of plenty of time to make it over there. So at this point, they're not really concerned over the time limit or anything. They really know that, okay, well, one, we just need to make it over there, right?
Yeah.
And then a kind of a difference here is that, in the show, Percy kind of brings up the Oracle again, saying it says you'll fail to save what matters most in the end. Percy is the Oracle is saying that this quest is going to fail, and no one's mentioned it. I think we should be taking this a little more seriously. And then this Annabeth is kind of, and this was what I liked, is that Annabeth is kind of the one who is really explaining to Percy this is just how things work, and she's a lot more experienced than Percy as far as being a half-blood and all the things that come about with it, because as far as Percy's concerned, he just found out he was a half-blood less than a week ago, so he doesn't really know how everything goes, right?
Right.
But Annabeth has been dealing with it really her whole life, and so Annabeth is telling him sometimes that's just how prophecies are. It's not going to make sense all the time at first. Sometimes you just have to wait until it happens to really figure out what it means. And Percy's he seems like he's not really satisfied with that answer, but there's not much he can really do about it.
Them's the breaks.
Yeah, so this is where we kind of have some differences between the book and the TV show, right? As far as getting to the St. Louis Arch, because they go to both those areas they go to those places in both the book and in the show, but the way that they get there is completely different. Okay. So starting off with how it was in the book, the train just makes a stop there. They kind of just have a layover over in St. Louis because the train is heading to Denver, but they have a layover in St. Louis. It's going to stay there for about an hour or so. And it stopped near the St. Louis Arch, so they were just okay, well, let's check it out. So they just kind of go there just on a whim because Annabeth is really into architecture. So she's okay, well, while we're here, the train's not moving, so we might as well just kind of see what the Arch has to offer while we're here. So that's how they go in. They go into the Arch, then they go underground. They're in the elevator, right?
Yeah.
And then or like they're going to get into the elevator, but there's too many people in the elevator. So Percy elects to stay behind, right? And then he was like, okay, I'll catch you guys on the next ride up. I'll meet you up at the top. So while Percy is waiting, there's like kind of another bunch of other people waiting for the next one, right? And then he gets into the elevator, and then he's standing next to this big lady who the book refers to her as very fat. And she's holding this chihuahua. Now, we find out that this turns out to be the echidna, the mother of all monsters, and the chimera.
Yeah.
But they don't reveal it just yet. She kind of just seems like this lady who just has a dog who is just here to just, again, take a look at the St. Louis Arch like everyone else is there, right? And one key factor that they didn't really mention in the show is that, like, satyrs are actually able to smell monsters, but underground smells kind of just like the monsters. They don't really tell you what monsters really smell like from his perspective, but being underground and being in places like this can make it more difficult for him to smell the monsters. So Grover before was not able to smell or detect any type of monster in the area. So the echidna is able to get in there and kind of almost corner Percy without really them knowing, right?
Yeah.
So then the chihuahua starts to bark a lot, and then the echidna is like, all right, well, I guess if you really want to, we can go ahead and just attack. So then echidna kind of reveals herself. The chimera transforms from its chihuahua shape into the full-on monster that we see in the show.
Yeah.
And then when she reveals herself as echidna, this is one thing that I wish they would have kept in the show, is like some of these funny comments from Percy that are like somewhat clueless but like are really hilarious, is that when she's revealed herself as the echidna, Percy says, isn't that some kind of anteater? Like, and then the echidna gets really angry at this. It's like she's like, oh, I hate humans and I hate the country of Australia for naming that animal after me, and everyone always says this, and you know, like this like really ticks echidna off, and this makes her really want to kill Percy even more. At this point, they're at the top of the arch, but like Grover and Annabeth aren't there, so Percy is all by himself. Then they have the little fight. This is where he pulls out his sword. He's fighting against Echidna, and at this point, this is where the Chimera is like, it's kind of, Percy is pretty much outmatched. Like he really can't do anything against the Chimera. Remember, Percy is still very new to fighting monsters.
Yes.
Like the only combat experience he's really had was very briefly against the Minotaur, again briefly against Miss Dodds, and then a little bit of training at camp. But like he still does not have much experience fighting monsters, especially ferocious monsters that are out to kill you. So he is completely outmatched. He ends up getting stung. The poison acts a lot faster in the book than it does in the show, and the Chimera burns a hole into the ground of the very top floor of the arch, and Percy ends up losing his sword. His sword falls down into the water, and then Percy basically has no choice but to fall down and fall into the water, right?
Yeah.
Because the poison's about to kill him. He doesn't have his sword. The Chimera is closing in on him, is about to kill him. He falls into the water, and then the water ends up healing him.
Yeah.
And there's a key difference here, because this was a change that actually made sense. Rick kind of had to make this change, because when he wrote the book, he was under the impression that the Mississippi River was flowing right underneath the arch.
Yeah.
But that's not actually how it is. The arch is actually very close to the Mississippi River, but the Mississippi River does not flow underneath it. So in the book, Percy fell directly from the arch into the Mississippi River. But in the show, what they had to do, they had to have the water pull him in, because the way they portrayed it in the show is the way that it actually is. Like, that is the relative position from the arch to the Mississippi River. So they had to have the water like pull him in towards it, because when he fell out of the arch, there was just like grass there, right? So to kind of say how we got here in the show, like I said, it's completely different. Echidna kind of confronts them all while they're still on the train, right?
Yeah.
And then she breaks the window of their cabin. The police officers confront them, and then they're kind of being held hostage by the St. Louis police that were on the train. And then Echidna kind of reveals herself, and this is where I will give some of the fans some credit here, because some of the fans have said that the idea that these monsters are revealing themselves kind of diminishes on the danger a little bit. Because remember, in the third episode, right when the quest started, Grover said, monsters are more common than you think. The key to survival is to figure out that they're a monster before they get you, right? So you have to discover them before they discover you.
Yeah.
But if the monsters keep revealing themselves every single time that they come about, then where's the real danger there? Because then if they reveal themselves, then they can prepare themselves to fight.
That's true. And what I will say about that is, of course they did it for dramatic effect because it's a TV show. I mean, they're gonna want, what monsters are. Normally, the smartest thing to do in that situation is the monsters would plan a sneak attack to catch them off guard, or be more I want to say subtle, more under the radar when approaching them, because obviously they know that they're coming, but that doesn't mean they have to make it easy for them to detect or be able to adapt to the situation. And I'm not gonna say that the show didn't do a good job of portraying in some areas I feel like it didn't do a good job. In some areas of the show I feel like it didn't do a good job portraying the stakes. And then there were other parts where I'm okay, I feel the danger here. I feel the stakes come, beginning to show themselves, and actually begin to feel like there's actual risk involved in this adventure. Whereas there's other parts of the show in it that obviously written for kids, being we want them to know that the hero's still going to be able to save the day at the end, but we have to make it suspenseful. And I feel like some parts of the show did that better than others. Because obviously and we can get into that in later episodes, but this particular instance, it was very prevalent for sure.
Yeah, and see, I don't think that the idea of danger being diminished entirely really happened in this episode.
No.
It kind of happened a little bit in episode 3, considering that Medusa wasn't actively attacking them at first. But it was pretty weird that she kind of revealed herself immediately, and then right at that point, everyone is kind of on their guard. They're okay, we can't look at her, obviously. And but in the book with Medusa didn't reveal herself immediately. She kind of just acted like she was this older woman who was just, all alone and didn't have any company, didn't have any customers to buy her statues. So she gave them food and then kind of cornered them, right? And then she took off her headdress and revealed that she was Medusa, right? So, and she was actively attacking them, and she had claws, right? So even without her ability to turn you to stone, they had to not look at her, but also at the same time dodge her claws, because she can tear you to shreds with them.
Yeah.
So there was kind of a, they did really reduce the amount of danger that Medusa posed, as far as how dangerous she was, right? Because they took away her claws, and she just flat out revealed herself, and she wasn't really attacking them that much. Like, they kind of just ran away, and then, like I said, put on the invisibility hat and then cut off her head, right? That was the whole fight. And then here, I feel like they diminished it a little bit by having Echidna reveal herself, but at the same time, the Chimera was a much bigger threat in this show than Medusa was.
Yeah.
Because when Echidna reveals herself, she has the Chimera like in this little like dog carrier thing, right?
Yeah.
Then eventually she like decides to let it out. It stings Percy. We assume it's poisonous, but the poison doesn't take effect right away. So then they get off of the train. They're running away. And another big difference here is that the St. Louis Arch is actually a temple to Athena. Like, she says that, like, oh yeah, one of Athena's children ended up creating or kind of leading the plan to build the arch. So because of that, it's a temple to Athena and monsters can't enter it. In the book, remember, I did not mention that because that was not the case. They did not have the idea to go to a temple to be safe because Echidna was already there. They weren't running away from Echidna in the book, right? But they make it to the arch. They're like, oh, we should be safe. Echidna is still able to enter the arch for some reason. And then we find out that Echidna kind of mentioned it, kind of like said telepathically to Annabeth, is that basically by allowing Percy to send the head of Medusa to Olympus, that embarrassed Athena to the point to where she just let Echidna in, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is where a lot of fans really disliked this because this does not sound like Athena at all. Like, and I kind of agree here because Athena throughout the books is always like really looking out after Annabeth, and she hates Percy. Annabeth in the books hates Percy, or not Annabeth, but Athena hates Percy, but she does not hold anything against Annabeth, right? So like a lot of times, like when Annabeth sides with Percy, Athena kind of just brushes it off and kind of puts it all on Percy and blames him for everything.
Yeah.
But here, Athena is like, "Oh, you embarrassed me, so I'm gonna let you die." Like,
yeah, that was very,
to me, does not make any sense.
It really didn't make any sense to be honest. Like, and the thing is too, that was crazy about that part was that, like, you know, it seemed so like out of sync with the situation that, like, it would have made more sense for like Athena's Athena's place to be a sanctuary for them for a little while, and then while they're forced to make a decision like, okay, well, we can't stay here forever, you know what I mean? So we need to, like, we're forced to make a decision here, you know what I mean? And instead of it just being like, oh well, Athena's being petty today, so she's just gonna let the enemy kill her daughter. I thought, especially since, like, you know, I understand that, like, I guess, you know, different gods show love to their children differently, obviously. Like Poseidon is showing Percy love as much as he can in his own way. I guess even Zeus turning Thalia into a tree was some weird, twisted love thing with God. So I understand gods love weird, right?
Yeah.
But in that it was very weird for them to write something like that in the middle of a high stakes scene. Like, you know what I mean? That just felt very out of place for Athena to be inserted into the particular moment in question here. And now she's on the spotlight. Now she's kind of made the center of attention here. And this is a character we haven't even met yet. You know what I mean? So that even makes it a little more awkward. It would have been something different if we had met her, we got to know her, and, you know, something about her character consistently says that she would do something like this, but for how Annabeth has been describing Athena up till this point, and I know like they had their beef with Medusa or whatever, but it just seems, even for someone that has only been mentioned by name briefly, inconsistent with the type of behavior that I would expect from, say, for example, the goddess of wisdom. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. She just seemed kind of shoehorned in when she didn't really need to be shoehorned in. You know?
Exactly. And it's just like, I don't think they needed to really include this whole part of the storyline of, oh, this is a temple to her. Like, I honestly thought it was better when it was in the book, when it was like, okay, the train has a layover, Annabeth is into architecture, so she's like, let's check it out, right?
Yeah.
And then just again, kind of the aspect of Echidna revealing herself. Now they have the chance to kind of prepare for it. And then also, I don't know why it took so long for the poison to kind of kick in, because they had run away, they had run through downtown St. Louis, then had made it to the arch, they went inside, and then it wasn't until then that the poison kicked in. But the poison kicked in the book almost immediately. And again, they weren't at the arch, but they were already at the arch in the book. They weren't in the show.
Yes.
So because of that, like the poison, I don't know if because they wanted the poison to kind of, be in effect while Percy is fighting the Chimera, which I'm like, if that's the case, they should have just waited until the Chimera stung Percy while he was at the arch fighting it.
Yeah.
But I think that they should have just stuck with it like the way that it was in the book. I think the only change they really needed to make here was that the St. Louis Arch does not, hang right over the Mississippi River, because that's not how it actually is. Again, that was a mistake from Rick Riordan. He was actually mistaken. He thought the Mississippi River actually flowed right underneath it. So that is why Percy just fell directly into the water in the book. But here, I think they should have just followed the same way that they did it in the book. This was a very unnecessary change, in my opinion. Like, I think that it made a lot more sense for them to get separated, and then once they're separated, then the Echidna is like, okay, he's all alone. Now is my chance, right?
Yes.
And then Percy kind of gets put into this corner where he doesn't really have any options. But like here, like they go to the arch. It's supposed to be safe, but Athena's like, no, you embarrassed me, so I'm going to allow the monster to come in. And then the monster comes in, the poison starts to kick in, they start splashing fountain water on Percy, thinking that it's going to help. It doesn't help. They all go up to the top of the arch, then like Percy kind of tricks them into pushing them out through the door, and then he faces the Chimera on his own. Again, the poison is kicking in, so Percy can't really do much. He's outmatched. He falls through the hole, and then the water pulls him into the water. Poseidon uses the water to pull him directly in, right?
Right.
And so I will say, like, once we get here, this is kind of the end of the episode. One thing that I did like was kind of the parallel here, was when Percy goes into the water, his foot ends up getting stuck underneath like a rock or something, and he's trying to pull it out. At this point, Percy doesn't realize he's actually able to breathe underwater. And then the Nereid, I don't know how to pronounce it, but the water spirit kind of is talking to Percy and is telling him like, look, your father is looking after you. It hurts him that he can't interact with you the way he wants to, but trust me, he's there. And then it's telling him to just breathe. And that's kind of a parallel right to the beginning of the episode, where Percy is telling his mom, just breathe, and now Percy is being told that exact same thing here at the end of the episode. And so Percy takes a deep breath, and then he realizes that he's able to breathe underwater. So, and that's kind of right where the episode ends right there. And that's similar to how it ends in the book as well. They actually don't kill the Chimera or Echidna. Percy does. They end up getting away, right? And they don't actually see the Echidna or the Chimera for the rest of the book. So it does feel a little underwhelming there, I think, in both instances, because it's like, oh, well, we had this fight and this monster was after him. They don't kill the monsters, but, they kind of just get away. So I will admit it does feel a little underwhelming there, but like I said, I do like the way that the book did it a lot more, because I think the way that the book made it feel a little more dangerous. Now, the Chimera definitely was dangerous. I mean, it poisoned Percy, it cornered him, it almost killed him. While Echidna is chasing them through St. Louis, she is like destroying cars and whatnot and causing havoc as she approaches the arch. So there's definitely action here. And I thought like the Chimera itself, I thought the visuals on the Chimera looked really nice. And I thought like the effects of like the fire looked really good when it was breathing the fire. So I definitely think that there was kind of suspense here, but I think the book did it much better because, again, the idea of these monsters just revealing themselves instead of, waiting for the right moment to attack,
right,
and like again catching the demigods off guard. Like I think when they just reveal themselves, that just it diminishes the danger at least a little bit.
Yeah.
It did so more so with Medusa than it did the Chimera and Echidna. But it still does it a little bit because, again, the entire idea that they even said in the show was that, in order to survive, you have to find the monsters before they find you.
Yes.
But if the monsters just keep revealing themselves, then why does that matter? Like...
Yep, no, it's absolutely true, for sure.
Yeah, so that is my issue with the this episode and kind of the last episode as well. Kind of just the way that the monsters are kind of just revealing themselves, almost to where like it doesn't really matter. But like overall, this was kind of my least favorite episode up to this point. I don't think it was a bad episode per se, but I definitely do think that like a lot of the changes they made in this episode were absolutely unnecessary. And I really think that it would have been much better if they just kept it relatively the same as the book. Again, they're on the train. Like if you didn't want to include the detail of them having to turn in the dog to get the reward money, then that's fine. That's not a big deal.
Yeah.
Because that part literally lasts like maybe 4 pages.
Yeah,
like in the book, but like at least keep the aspect of them on the train and then the layaway and then they get separated, and that gives the Echidna and the Chimera the opportunity to attack Percy.
Yeah.
I think that would have been a lot better than for them to... Then Echidna reveals herself on the train. They run away. They run to the arch, which is supposed to be a safe place, but Athena is mad and says, nah, I'm going to let the monster in to get y'all. So, and then we have that, right? So I think that the way that they did it in the show was just not... As far as like story-wise and plot-wise, it just did not make that much sense. Like, again, I think that they kind of, in this instance, they butchered Athena's character a little bit because, again, that's not how she acts in the books. Like, and especially considering that Annabeth has been spending this entire time basically like praising Athena,
yeah,
and talking about how much she loves her, and talking about how good Athena was to her while she was alone and how she watched over her as she was leaving home and traveling to Camp Half-Blood. Like, for her to just kind of turn around and be like, oh, well, you went along with Percy sending Medusa's head to Olympus, so now I'm going to let you die. That, to me, just feels very out of character for her, for what I know from the books.
Yeah.
And a lot of fans feel that way. Like, a lot of fans do not like that they did this to Athena. And again, like you said, we haven't even actually met the character in the book yet, or in the show yet. Like, at this point, you haven't seen her in the book either.
Yeah.
But, like, we haven't even met this character yet. The character has only been mentioned by name, and we've only gotten the descriptions that Annabeth has given us so far. So then, even then, it kind of contradicts what we've been told so far. So it's like they said one thing, and then they turn around and go do another thing, and it just does not add up. And like I said, it kind of butchers her character a little bit. And for someone who hasn't read the books, you might think, oh well, that's just how Athena is. But like for people who have read the books, they're like, well, no, this is not how she is at all. This is like a complete turnaround. I would expect something like this from Ares, maybe, but like not from Athena. And again, like you said, the goddess that is supposed to be the goddess of wisdom, why would she stoop to these actions? That just sounds very contradictory to her whole ideology.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of my take on this episode. Again, I don't think it was a bad episode, but I do think those changes were really unnecessary, and I do think that it would have been a lot better had they have just stuck to the original kind of plot line for this part of the show. Like, I mean, I know this kind of, everyone kind of says if it's not broken, don't fix it, but like, you know, really, like in this case, like I don't think there was really much of a reason to change this, because I'm like, what advantages did this change in this part of the storyline offer? In fact, it doesn't really feel like it offered anything. To be honest, it felt like it just made things worse.
Yeah, it didn't really offer much, truth be told. I think that this was like a shallow attempt to create suspense for what would be like halfway through the series. You know what I mean? So I think they were like, okay, we're halfway through the series. We need to introduce some stakes. You know, we need to signify, oh, well, this is the middle of the quest. And so I guess that was kind of their idea of doing so, but I personally think it was very poorly executed. And the thing is like, honestly, the episode that follows, like, I actually liked, but
yeah,
you know, it just, the setup for it was just, in my opinion, not great.
Yeah, I think the fifth episode was significantly better than the fourth one here. That one does have its fair share of changes. It is, you know, much closer to that portion of the book than this one was to its respective portion of the book. And then in the movie, it wasn't even in the movie. So the Chimera and the Echidna weren't even in the movie at all. So there was no real reason for me to explain this portion of the movie, because that didn't happen.
Yeah.
Because I think at this part in the movie, like, because after Medusa, they end up running into the Hydra, I think, right? Yeah. Because that's when they go to that museum. Because again, the movie, they're looking for the pearls that will transport them back from the underworld.
Yes.
And then they go to this museum, and then there's like a bunch of like, you know, custodians, like that transform into the Hydra. Like,
that was such a weird scene. It's just like three random guys like cleaning a building. They're like, oh, we're the guardians of this. I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah. And then like they call Luke on like FaceTime or something.
They FaceTime homie, be like, yo, so like, how are we supposed to get this? And they're like,
they're like, because like at this point they haven't actually used the flying shoes. Again, Percy is using the flying shoes in the movie, which he's not supposed to, but he's using them in the movie. They FaceTime Luke, and they're like, yeah, Luke, how do we use these shoes? And then he's like, oh yeah, Percy, you got to get a running start, and then you'll fly. Like, I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, because there's like a code word for it. You have to say Maya and the wings come out. You don't just get a running start and then all of a sudden you're flying.
I guess that was their way of just like making it more straightforward. But I honestly think I honestly, you know what? I won't even say that. I just think they changed that to change it. I think it was just a random change. I don't think there was any methodology behind that at all.
But yeah, I will say at least like the action in that scene actually somewhat made sense once they started fighting the Hydra. Like, Percy is like flying around and like chopping off its heads, like not realizing what he's doing is like, it's just gonna make it worse, because the heads are gonna grow back and there's gonna be 2 for every head you cut off.
Yeah.
And then like Annabeth is like shooting it with a crossbow, I think, and like then they end up just using Medusa's head to kill it. So it's like, I will say, like, one scene like I thought was pretty cool in that instance was like at some point like the Hydra is cornering Percy, and then he kind of like blows up the pipes and like uses like basically creates like a wall of water to kind of block the flames from the Hydra. I thought that was pretty cool, but like other than that, it just didn't make any sense. But you know, I was, as much as I said I didn't really like the way they handled the Echidna and the Chimera in the show, at least it was actually included. The movie just put the Hydra in and did what it wanted.
That's facts.
Like, again, the Hydra does not appear in the first book at all, and it doesn't appear in the first show because, again, it didn't appear yet, so it wasn't supposed to happen. But they just threw it in the movie anyway.
Yep,
so
they just did it.
Yeah, at least the book got, you know, the characters right. You know, like the show. We went to the Arch, and the Echidna was there, right? Yeah. And they got attacked, right? So at least that all added up in the show. So as much as I didn't like the way they executed it in the show, at least it actually happened.
True. Very true. You gotta give them points for consistency, I guess.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's really it for this episode. This was the shortest episode so far. I mean, I feel like the first two episodes kind of hit us pretty hard because they were long. And again, those first two episodes were really introducing us to everything. And then the third episode was purely just Medusa.
Yeah.
And then the fourth episode was purely just Echidna and Chimera. So this episode was a lot shorter than the others. But like, you know, the episodes are going to get a little bit longer as we continue to go on. And like I said, this episode kind of had more of a negative connotation from us because I personally did not like this episode that much. A lot of people don't like this episode that much. And like even you said that like even without reading the books, like you think it wasn't really executed that well.
Yeah, I know.
So next episode will be a lot more positive because I do actually like that episode a lot more. And even though it's different, you know, I do think they did a better job of at least trying to tell that portion of the plot that they wanted to tell, you know? But here, it just didn't make any sense.
Yeah.
Quite honestly.
Nope. But, I mean, like I said, they get points for consistency somewhere, I guess. I just, you know,
yeah.
I think narratively, this was the episode that kind of, like, rubbed me the wrong way, to be honest.
Yeah. This isn't the worst for me. I am not really a fan of how they handled the Lotus Casino, but that's a couple episodes from right now, and we'll get to that when we get to that.
Yeah, it's going to be a special one. It's definitely going to be a special one.
That'll be a special one. If you thought this one was negative, whoa, just wait till we get there.
That was going to be something else.
But yeah, I think that's going to be it for this episode. You know, I think we really covered the whole episode in full. Like I said, comparing the book, the way the book handled it to the way the show handled it, and the movie didn't handle it all, so we brought up the Hydra. But like, that's really it for this episode as far as episode 4 of Percy Jackson. You know, if you guys want to share your thoughts on this episode, if you watched it, or if you just are watching this podcast and are just listening to people talk about a show that you didn't watch, well, then how do you think it sounds based on the way that we described it? Feel free to let us know in the comments. You know, anybody new here, if you are new to our podcast, we talk about various video games, TV shows, all kinds of things. Right now, we're strictly focusing on Percy Jackson until we get through it, but we do have plans to talk about other things in the future. And if it's your first time here, then well, we appreciate you coming here and listening to us talk about Percy Jackson.
Yep, absolutely. We appreciate it, guys.
But yeah, that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed what we had to say. Definitely tune in for the next episode. We're going to be trying to get these episodes out a little more often. I actually did suffer a car accident recently. I'm fine. You know, I don't have any fatal injuries or anything. But that did put us back a little bit as far as getting these things recorded. But we should be able to get back to a semi-regular kind of upload schedule as far as these now.
Yep, for sure.
But yeah, but that's going to be it for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys so much for listening, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode.